All right, we're gonna dive into the use case diagrams now. So I know we took a look at Visio when we were doing the PER diagrams, but let's kind of walk back through what that looks like. Just kind of repetition sometimes helps it makes it sink in for you guys. So essentially, when you get Microsoft Visio, if you can't find it in like just the generic stuff out here, as far as common programs and that type of stuff, it will be underneath your Microsoft Office. Now, I kind of actually forgot, I was looking at during the break, is I forgot that we've switched over to 2013, and they've actually changed the diagrams on me. So I gotta do a little bit of research. We're gonna make some assumptions for tonight and just roll with it. But I do kind of reserve the right to come back with maybe a couple more tips here and there as we go through this. So this is what Visio 2013 looks like. There's actually there's also a couple of guidance documents out on D2L too. If you take a look at out here underneath content, if you go to use cases, there's actually for 2010. If you're using Visio, there's drawing use case diagrams and use case diagram conventions and that type of stuff. I will have to alter these now that the university has upgraded to 2013 because these diagrams are explicitly for 2010. And I'll have to modify those as we go forward and that type of stuff. And I know with the database diagrams, I actually did some research last semester, and people extremely upset in the user community as far as Visio, Microsoft changing some of the Visio diagrams and that type of stuff. Because they've actually stripped out some functionality, and that's what I was trying to find over the break is basically some of that functionality gets stripped out. Doesn't look like I'm going to be successful. But essentially what we're doing is we're using a lot of the software items in here. So sometimes your diagrams will just pop up to the top, depending on what it thinks you want or what you've used lately and that type of stuff. But you can also drill down into those categories. And if you go into software, a lot of what we're using starts with UML. So that's that unified modeling language that we talked about previously. But you can scroll through here and you can see there's a whole bunch of different diagrams. So always make sure you start with the right diagram. That's the first test. See if you can get into that. And what we're looking for is this UML use case right here. The other way of doing that is you also have a search box up here. You can go to UML, and that'll restrict it down to the UML diagrams. And you can see that there's a lot of those in here. So they support 6 of the diagrams, it looks like. And there's at least 12, 13. You can also type in use case, and that should get you right down to the overall diagram. You double click on that, and it's going to ask you, hey, or in his case, they went ahead and just created it. Sometimes they ask you if you want metric units or US units and that type of stuff. And some basic ones, yeah. I would just, yours is different, yeah. Oh, you got 2016? There's a 2016 now? I haven't even upgraded to 2013 yet. All right. So. Yeah, it does have a just blank one. Okay. Like already pre-made one. I don't like the pre-made stuff, and you'll find out on 542. I always hate Microsoft templates because they try to answer some stuff for you up ahead or ahead of what you want to do and that type of stuff. It usually causes more issues than what it's worth. So I'm going to show you how to make it from scratch here as we go through it. So I need to get on the ball here and get you guys some updated documentation and that type of stuff. But essentially the way Visio works, just regardless of what version you have, is you've got what they call the canvas area in the middle. We kind of talked about this with the PER diagrams. And then you have your stencils over on the left-hand side. The way to know if you've also made it to the right diagram is your stencil should look like this if you're using 2013. And you should see, at the very minimum, regardless of if it's 13, 10, or 16, or whatever you're using, you should at least get use cases and actors. All right, okay, good. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to zoom in just a little bit to give you guys the ability to actually see some of this when I put it out on the diagram. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to build, or basically reflect the requirements for a system that you guys probably all know in some shape or form. And I'm probably showing my age here, but I'm going to go back to Facebook and reference it, right? Probably not. What's the good social media site these days? LinkedIn. Well, that's your professional one. Yep. And that's it? Is that LinkedIn? We could do LinkedIn instead of my Facebook. Okay. What Twitter? And what else do you guys use? Instagram. So somebody explain Instagram and Snapchat to me. What does it do? Is it just photos? And Snapchat's like just photos, but they go away right away, right? Okay. All right. I think the Instagram, that's what all those young guys that made a bunch of money, right? And they're running around like crazies now. You guys ever seen that? Okay. So I don't know anything about the software, but I know about the software makers. So they talk about how they like just spend all their money everywhere and that type of stuff. Any other ones that are really popular right now? What about Pinterest? Oh, Pinterest? My wife is on Pinterest. It's addicting. Because that's your hobby site, right? Yeah, I think she's getting like recipes and art stuff off of there and all sorts of stuff. So. And then does anybody do Quora? It's called Quora, Quora, and it's like a bunch of questions and stuff. You basically can post an answer up here, and then basically it will, everybody and their brother answers this question. Yeah. I really like that guy. I read a lot of You actually know this guy? Yeah, I read on LinkedIn. I read a lot. Okay, all right. So like here they have, so I'm interested in data science, so they, some of it's customized to me. Here, what's the worst day of your life and why? You got a nice little gravestone here. I always figure the day you die is probably not the worst day of your life. Probably don't know any better. So. How do you stick to your goals? Is it unhealthy to exercise while you have your period? Did Bush lie? You've got all sorts of stuff in here. What's the best marriage advice you can, that you would give and that type of stuff. So, what should I do if I am dependent on my family financially and do not particularly respect them because of their differing worldviews and opinions? And then what happens is people will vote on the responses. Because like if you click through each one of these, there's actually like, I guess this one there's not. It's just Tumblr. What's Tumblr do? It's kind of like a blog. All the weird people go since I have problems with the audio because I don't have the computer hooked up to my phone and that type of stuff, I'll have to send you guys. I'll have to post a link. There's a. I won't play it here, but I'll pull it up. The Facebook of the '80s. Or is it the '90s? Yeah, it's this one here. This one's pretty good if you want to take some time. I'll get you the link to it. But basically, they show you what Facebook would have looked like back whenever computers first came around. I always laugh at this one because they have something about you can have your picture, you can send your picture in, we'll scan it for you and put it on the web in about 3 weeks. Because like when I first started, I got out of high school in '98, and to date myself, I guess a little bit. I actually went and started. So here's one of my work stories. So I actually started in OBGYN of all places. So I grew up in Southern Illinois. So if you guys know where Champaign is, yeah, University of Illinois and stuff, go about 2 hours south of there, a little kind of middle of nowhere and that type of thing. But I was into computers and I got a job up here and came up here and went to school and that type of stuff. So my first job was over at Sinai, working in OBGYN. And back then, the OBGYN docs actually were part UW, and they actually had their own computer network before the hospital had a computer network. Like, they didn't actually have all their computers wired together. You just had standalone computers around the rest of the hospital. But the UW docs had their network and that type of stuff. Pretty archaic by today's terms. But essentially, they also had a scanner and that type of stuff. And scanning pictures was new. Like, you didn't even have digital cameras back then and that type of stuff. So, like, they always talk about this generation as being the most photographed. They'll probably have the least pictures at the end of the day because you guys have it all electronically, and whether you actually keep them long term is a question going forward. Back then, you used to have to print them out, right, and actually get them made into physical format and that stuff. Today, they sit on your phone until your phone crashes, and then you're lucky if you got them backed up into the cloud somehow. So one of my first jobs within the first month was, so they have grand rounds. If you don't know what grand rounds are, it's in a hospital environment. They're kind of like continuing education. It's kind of like lunch and learn. So the doctors will actually come, and one of them will lecture on a topic, or they may bring in a speaker and that type of stuff on some type of continuing educational topic and that type of stuff. So sometimes they have the residents who are the doctors, you know, that they've gotten their medical degree, but they're not independently working. They're doctors in training, so to speak. Resident physicians will actually give the grand rounds. And so I had the chief resident, she for OBGYN, she wanted to basically give this talk. And she's like, hey, Dale, you know how to scan stuff, because that was the computer guy and that type of stuff, and ended up being an AV boy and that kind of thing. And so I was like, sure, I can scan some photos for your presentation, because, you know, even people back then didn't even know how to get it into PowerPoint. Like, that was actually a chore, getting a picture embedded into PowerPoint and that type of stuff. Never thought about what her topic would have been. So here I'm a green farm boy off the farm, coming up to Milwaukee, and the thing with Milwaukee is it was like, crap, nobody ever goes to sleep around here. There's always something going on and that type of thing. But anyways, it was like I got up here and putting this presentation together. I have to scan these pictures out of the medical book. So go back to that anatomy book, and that type of thing that we were talking about last time. And she's like, so guess what her topic is? Third trimester women with full body rashes. So I had to sit there and scan pictures of these naked women. Because it's full body rashes, right? They were green and orange and everything else that you could think of. There's all these rare conditions and that type of stuff that people get. And I'm sitting here, covering my eyes with one hand and kind of peeking through and getting scanned. I'm not supposed to see that stuff, so. That was one of my first experiences in OBGYN. So there you go. See how far technology's come? Now you just, you just take a picture of stuff from a book and embed it into your PowerPoint. So, and the doctor will do it themselves because they know how now. So we've come a long way. But yeah, this is kind of funny because it would actually talk about the old technology and stuff if you've ever used the old versions of Windows and that type of stuff. So we have Facebook. So I got my Facebook account out here. So I don't know why that came up. Oh, because he's trending, I guess. So you've got all your different levels of functionality, right, that you have in here. So if you're Mark Zuckerberg and you're sitting there trying to figure out what should Facebook do for us, you might put together a use case diagram. It would be one way of kind of going through and starting to figure out, well, what if I'm going to build a social media website, what do I want it to be able to do for our users and you do for my company and that type of stuff. So that's what I want to do, is just a very simplistic example to warm us up. And basically, I think that we probably, by the time we get through this, that'll probably be what we do tonight. We'll do the ATM next week and maybe another example. But what I want you to do is make yourself Mark Zuckerberg for the night and actually think about, well, if I'm going to build a use case diagram to represent Facebook, what actually goes into that? Who are the actors? How do I use Facebook? Those become the use cases. And who's all involved with all this stuff? And see, and here it even does stuff I didn't touch it, right? And you move my mouse, and it already told me I've got new stories and that type of stuff. So that's like an actor, or probably a time actor at work as we go through this. So all sorts of fun stuff in here. And now, have you guys quit using Facebook? Yeah, I don't use it much anymore. I post about once a month at the most anymore. So, and what I always hate with the Facebook stuff now is nothing's in chronological order. I don't know why that bothers me so much, but it's like I don't care what happened 3 days ago. I want to see what happened yesterday. So, as we go through it. So what we're going to do is that's going to be our challenge for tonight, is we're going to take Facebook here and translate it into a use case diagram. So let's talk about how we set up our diagram first off before we get in too far into functionality. So the first thing that I would always start with is basically building out the subsystem box. So they call it a subsystem. I usually just call it the system. And the reason they call it subsystems is because a lot of times in big, complex projects and stuff, you're going to get many of these boxes, one representing each kind of segment of your system and that type of stuff as you go through it. They've even changed this to a point. So what you have in here is, can you guys see that green color? Kind of. Okay. Let me enlarge this here. What you have is you basically drag this out and you get a big box where you can start to put your use cases in it. And what's the one thing that you see in here that you can kind of probably adjust? The name. Yeah. Stuff is not hard. The questions I ask are usually not hard, so feel free to answer them as you go, because Otherwise, it's going to get really boring really fast if you have me trying to sit there and say what Facebook should do. And then what you can do is you can put in the name of your system. So actually, how does Facebook spell themselves? The capital F? Okay, good. So never remember exactly how they type it. So we can basically put in the name of our system. So here it's Facebook. So you would do that for whatever system. So when we get to the ATM, we'll say, hey, it's our ATM system, and that type of stuff. Or if you're doing, Canton Memorial Hospital could be the, the name of your system, like the ordering system or medical record or whatever we want to model. So that's the first thing that we have is basically get your system rectangle on the box. Because now what you're going to do is you're going to pile stuff into the diagram. So here we're going to do it collaboratively. A lot of times what I like to do is if I was doing this, not in this setting, is I'd really just come along and make a list. Just on a sheet of paper and say, here's all the people I think are using the system, here's how they're going to use it, that type of stuff, and then dump it into the diagram after the fact as we go through it. So you can start this two different ways. You can either start thinking about the actors, or you can start thinking about what are the different ways we use Facebook and that type of stuff. This is nice because you got an existing system, right? We're actually just trying to take what's there and actually represent it. It's a little harder, though, as you get into and you don't necessarily have a system in front of you to take a look at and start to just model off of that. So that's where you're going back to those core requirements that we're getting. So who wants to start us off? What's a way we either use Facebook or somebody that uses Facebook? What was that? You can write on a wall. What do my kids like to do, too? My kids are 6 and 3, so. So what we do is we have a piece of functionality we have write on a wall, right? So you can write on somebody's wall on Facebook. So what we do in here is we drag out this use case oval. So if you didn't see that, let me back up here. Basically, you're always just clicking on the stencil over here, click and hold, and drag it over. And then you can resize it accordingly and that type of stuff. So and actually, let me back out to 100%. Let's see how big this diagram actually is. So you can, reshape, resize this and that type of stuff too, as you need to do. I'm always going to be zoomed in so you guys can see what's going on. But it will show you the edge of the paper and that type of stuff, so that way it'll print out nicely for you too. And then, so this is a nice, now in 2013 and 16, it evidently decided to color a lot of stuff. I really like the black and white. I don't care if it's colored for your diagram or not. But if you get into 2010, it's going to be black and white. It's essentially what all the stencils look like. But what we can do is we can double click on a stencil and then we can write in as far as, or type into it, I should say, as we do this. So we can basically say write on, and it would be write on a wall. Is it another user's wall or you write on your own? Write on a wall. So we can say write on a user's wall, or something along those lines. Why does it keep? Helps if I actually type correctly too. And then sometimes you got to play with it to make it actually look nice inside the oval, like I recentered to where I pressed enter and that type of stuff. But essentially, that's representing basically the idea that hey, we can write on a user's wall. So how do I actually go about doing that though? So if I'm in Facebook, how do I write on somebody's wall? So do I just type? I don't know. So I see I already went down one path. So how, sorry, take me through that. Where do I? Or on my own. What's on my mind? Yep. I hate this new stories piece. There you go, right? And then press enter, right? Oops. Oh, I got to hit post. Yeah, enter doesn't work. I think for a while they had the enter button where it would just automatically do things. We hit post, and then what does it do? You post it on your wall, right? So that's probably a very simplistic way of writing on a wall, right? So basically, you evidently start out on your wall, right? And then you type into the box and you hit post, and then what does it do? What does it do when I hit post? It's on my newsfeed, right? And when I hit post, what else happens? So it saves my profile. What else? Other people can see it, yeah. So it gets published in some way, right? So there's more going on than just typing in a box. I mean, there is literally, that's what the user experience is. Hey, type in the box and press enter. But you got to remember, you're Mark. You're Mr. Zuckerberg. You know, you didn't make $1 billion for no reason and that type of stuff. You got to think through what is all the different steps and dynamics that went into actually writing on somebody's wall. That's literally what somebody at Facebook had to sit down and say, okay, how does writing on somebody's wall actually work? And that's where that narrative comes into play. So as you go through this, you know, if we go back to our slide presentation here, the idea of writing on the wall, all those steps that we were just talking about is, yeah, maybe the actor has something really slim here that they're doing. They're literally typing in and hitting post. The system is doing a lot behind the scenes. So number one, the system is sitting there and it's going to sit there and say, okay, I don't know, does Facebook regulate vulgarity and that type of stuff? Do they let you post whatever you want? They can report it, but you can post it? Okay, so that's not something that's evidently doing. But we have that security aspect, right? So I think there's a place in here where if I go back to this, you can actually sit there and toggle who actually gets to see it. So that's part of actually writing on the wall too, is you get to do the restrictions here where, you know, does the public do it? Do the friends, you know, can my friends see it, or is it only me? Yeah, I guess. So I don't know why you would. I don't know. I guess you could use it to write yourself notes. I don't know why you would ever do that. And this is the other one I never understood why people want to do this one either. So you guys got to remember that once something's on the internet, it never goes away, ever. It's always there for life. Right. Yeah, on or off of Facebook, they can see it eventually. So, yeah. So if you guys haven't locked your accounts up, I would definitely do that as a fair minimum, and never post anything that's going to come back to haunt you 20 years later. So, I mean, you guys are in college, you're probably doing crazy shit stuff right now. So, just be careful with that. If you ever want to run for political office, don't put anything out that limits you in that shape or form. Also, you know, employers are looking at this now too. They'll go out and actually look at you know, if you have public Facebook and stuff, your employers will look and that type of stuff. Huh? Yeah, yeah. And then there used to be a site. I don't know, I think this is going to be too vulgar here. Called Failbook. And then essentially, you can actually see in here, like, bad posts is what it used to do. No, this is failed blog. I don't want that. So these are basically posts that other people have put up that basically, if you actually go through and read them, pretty hilarious. So they basically collect all these from people's public posts and that type of stuff. So if you need to laugh, you can go take a look at that. All right, so then that's what the system is doing. So there's more than, so what we literally wrote on our diagram, you know, right on a user's wall as the use case boiled up, right? Behind the scenes, there's lots of steps. You actually have to write it, the user clicks post. From there, you know, it's actually the security has to get set on the message. The message actually has to go into some type of publication where basically it's getting distributed to my friends' walls or timelines or news feeds, however you want to term it, and that type of stuff. That's what's going on at the narrative levels. You're literally going through and defining each one of those steps as we go through it and do that as well. So, and then that is basically writing on somebody's wall. The other thing we can do too is we can do all these other actions, right? The new light thing? Okay. Really? That got released today?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, you can put an angry face on your own.
Okay, that's cute. I don't feel dorky at all. So evidently you can put emotion. What do they call these, emojicons or whatever? Yeah. And that type of stuff. So we can model out this as a use case. This is the way people use Facebook, right? And actually, one of the main ways they do it is the idea of the like function. So you can literally, come back here and here's my nephew, and he just okay. So, but that is a way that people often use Facebook, right? Is whether they like something or not. I was always disappointed. I just want a thumbs down. All I need. I don't need this wow and angry face and all that stuff. Just give me a thumbs down so I can vote, downvote people. That's what this one actually has, is you can downvote people's answers. So it's kind of a challenge.
I think it would cause too much problems if people on Facebook, so they can't afford it.
Probably. So let's model that one here. So what would we name that as? So first off, we need a use case, right? And then we need basically, so let's go through the formal conventions here. So what we need is a verb and a noun. Specifically the way your use cases are put into your ovals. So that's what we got to name it. So what are we liking? A status? Okay. So we can say, it can be as simple as like status. And that can represent a use case. Now what else is missing from our diagram currently? We've talked about all these elements that we're supposed to put on our diagrams. What are we missing so far? Yeah, we need an actor. Yeah, we need our favorite. See, they even got rid of the stick people. This isn't even fun anymore. Aren't you, Microsoft? So here we have a chubby person versus stick people. Did I tell you guys about how you don't actually draw stick people in TikTok? Okay. All right. Yeah. One of the benefits of being married to an art teacher, but you get to learn. So, so here we have basically, I guess, chubby man. What we're going to do is we're actually going to name them. So we actually have to name them. You double click on all this stuff to basically put it in. So what do we want to call this person, or this type of person, really? End user? Okay. Do we have something maybe a little more explicit? Like, how do we want to define it? How does Mark Zuckerberg view it?
Money.
Client? A what?
Money bag.
Money bag. Well, that's what Mark Zuckerberg is. He views his clients as money makers, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would go with something a little bit more explicit. Go back to the idea we had in some of the slides, is that, in order to do this in Facebook, what do you have to be? You have to be an end user, but are all end users created equal? So I can come on to Facebook, evidently I can see public postings, right, even if I don't belong to Facebook. So what do I have to do probably in order to write on the user blog? Yeah, I got to be a member. Probably, I don't know what they call them at Facebook, but I probably have to be the idea of the end user, but in this case, probably more explicitly a member of Facebook or account holder, or however you want to term it. Whatever your company would sit there and call them. Facebookers. I don't know if that's a term or not. It'd be interesting to see if they actually have a way that they refer to their users. Some companies do that and that type of stuff. I'm just going to do. I'm going to call them Actually, I'm going to call them a Facebook member. And you guys will come up with names. There's no right answer necessarily to some of this. It has to make sense, though. So it has to pass the logic test or the content sniff test as we go through this. And then what else are we missing from our diagram? Yeah, we're missing a bunch of arrows. Now, here's where I'm a little disappointed. If you go into 2010, there's actually a defined arrow that has, or you can set it up to have an arrowhead, and that's in those instructions I was talking about on D2L. I can literally not figure out how to get an arrowhead onto these association lines. Typically, what you do is you would have this line, and you would double click on it, and it actually lets you set this term called is navigable, and you can actually make an arrowhead. You cannot do that anymore. So I'm going to use maybe the way it's intended to tonight, because they have the abstract piece here, which is basically this arrowhead with the open-ended where it's white in the middle. I'm going to use that anyways, even though it's not quite the way I would like to use it. So we have two lines. So we're going to use this generalization line, this association line. And so the question you always have is every oval has to be initiated. Somebody's actually got to kick off that piece of work, whatever we're doing. So here somebody's actually got to instigate the fact that we're writing on the user's wall. Or basically they have to, or the other way we have a line is basically they're receiving something or giving something to it. But we always have somebody that's going to have an arrowhead going into that oval. So every oval you ever have, let me step back. Every time you have an oval, you better have a line with an arrowhead on it. That tells me who's actually performing that activity, who's actually touching the system and actually doing it. So in this case, who's actually doing that work? Yeah, the Facebook member is. And hopefully that's pretty straightforward because it's only after we've identified too. But, you know, I logged in, and that's kind of my precondition. I've already logged into Facebook. As a member, this is something I can do. I can go and actually initiate the fact that I'm writing on somebody's wall. In this case, I did my own, right? The other thing I can do too is basically, I can like that status. So I'm initiating both of those activities as I go through it and do that. So who else might actually see some of the product of this? We kind of talked about this a little bit. Who else is involved in these use cases? The employees of Facebook? Oh, the employers when they book? Yep. So so let's classify them. What do we want to describe them? Yeah, other parties or other, you know, potentially you could have other members, you could have, you know, Facebook has levels of people, right? And we kind of saw that if we went back to the website here. They've even got definitions around some of these people as far as who they are and who they aren't. So what we can do is we can model that out too. So let's do that. It actually works out pretty well. So let's put this into, so we've got me represented, right? I'm the Facebook member. Who else is in this list? We've got my friends and public. Let's actually model them out. And that's pretty easy. All you do is you need basically, these are classes of people. So what I can do is I can drop on another person here and basically call them what they are. So in Facebook language, I have a friend. And so, and I don't use plurals typically on this either. So we don't call them plurals because it's the class of objects. So a lot of times we don't put the S on it and that type of stuff. Let me zoom out here. So now what I want to do is say, hey, a friend actually will receive my post potentially, right? Based on those steps that are happening inside writing on the user's wall. They can do both of those, right? Because I can see the like too. So what I can do here is I can drag in this other association line. And I can basically connect those up. Sometimes I have to drag things around and make them a little bit easier to read and that type of stuff. That's just part of the hassle of having a diagram. And then as you were saying is basically you could be a recipient of both of these. Because it will actually tell me sometimes when people, you know, like things. So in that newsfeed, I think over on the right-hand side, it actually looks different here.
For Business Insider, Facebook, we don't call them users anymore. We call them people.
They call them people? Yeah. Facebook people? Okay. Yeah. So, and that's where every company has their language as you go through it. For the sake of time, I'm going to stick with Facebook more, so instead of switching over to people or person. And then what we're doing here with this line is we're really representing that you're receiving something. Sometimes it's actually a physical thing that you can receive from a system, like a printout of a report or something else, like we talked about those packing slips for the warehouse. Sometimes it's just information. Like in this case, it's largely information. It's like, hey, Dale wrote on his on his wall. My nephew Chris saw it, and that type of stuff. He ended up liking it, and that type of stuff too. And then what we do, and again in the narrative, just I don't want you guys to forget about the narrative. The narrative actually explains all those activities that are going in it. So when you write out that Word document, you're going to have to talk about, hey, there is a Facebook member. This is what they do. This is when the friend might receive that information. Who else can participate in these two items, or maybe at least in the right on the user's wall? Who else did we see? So is there anybody else on this list?
I don't think public, right?
They can see it, so they can receive something though, right? So we still want to model them out as part of the diagram. So even if they just receive something, they become part of your diagram as you go through it. And so we can literally add in another actor here. You can say public. And maybe and we would define public. We would go, okay, that's like, internet users in general, or something like that. So each one of these would have a definition that goes with them. And then basically we link them up again with this non-arrowhead association line. And then what I can do now is as I take a step back and look at this diagram, I can sit here and read this and go, oh, here's Facebook. One of the things I can do with Facebook is write on the user's wall. Evidently, the Facebook member is the one that initiates that activity. And a friend and the public is participating in that use case in some shape or form. So, and people intuitively can look at these diagrams and go, yeah, that's right, or that's not right. Once you've worked in something for so long, it's like, the process. Sometimes seeing it in the picture format helps you explain it a little better and that type of stuff. And that's really what we're after. This is largely a communication tool as we go through this. So I guess my other question then is, as we start to move through this, is what else can you do at Facebook? Let's just play around with this and maybe even start to think like, well, if you're Mark Zuckerberg, what else do you need Facebook to do and that type of thing. So let's
Probably need those ads play.
Yeah, that's a great one, right? Because now you're thinking like Mark Zuckerberg. Because where does he get revenue from and that type of stuff? Well, they get them largely through advertisements, right? I think and sometimes gaming and that type of stuff too. So what we can do is we can model that idea out as far as having some type of service in here. So what do we want? How do we want to do this for our users? So who is going to be the users with an advertisement? So if you're Mark Zuckerberg, you're really the kind of thinking about you're the system, right? You are Facebook, kind of. You want to think of it that way. So who's our user in this case?
Or like the advertising.
Yeah, for the advertisements.
Corporate.
Yeah. It's going to be businesses largely. Sometimes nonprofits will sit out there and do some type of communication, like, I have a cause or something I want to educate people about. It can be politics where, you want to put a political ad out there, that type of stuff. So it varies, but largely it's going to be organizations, right? That are going to do that in some shape or form. So actually, has anybody ever researched how you actually do that on Facebook? Yeah. Have you ever looked into how you get an advertisement going on Facebook and that type of stuff? Okay. Okay, well, we'll have to revisit that too. Because that's actually in your narrative around liking a statement. There's probably a tie into that. So you'd actually say, hey, this like statement might trigger an ad and that type of stuff. Yep.
Yeah, so we do. So we've got Facebook.com/business.
Is it?
And over there, like create page, create ads, all that kind of stuff. Like explain how the ads work, stuff like that.
So yeah, here you go. Basically, it's going to walk you through it, right? So they want you to get in and actually create all the ads. So this is the other side of Facebook. So,
Google that. No,
yep. And you can see there they even got a different name, right? Facebook for Business. And you can create your page, you can create an ad. Those are all pieces of functionality. Those are all use cases that we have. So let's. Huh? I would assume too. They maybe have like maybe one or two to get started for free or something. If you're a non-for-profit, you can show it if you get free ones. Well, yeah. Otherwise you can't run all these servers and do all that stuff for nothing. So. Well, if you largely think about the business model of Facebook, that's what they're into. So what actually happens is, I know with Twitter, you can literally go and get, they will actually allow you to tap into all the tweets. And you can actually download those, and it's actually a big thing in data science because it's one of the few ways to get at what people think and their emotions and that type of stuff. Like, we can collect a lot of demographic data about you guys, but it's hard to actually tie that to what you actually think and feel and do and that type of stuff. So literally, you can get a data stream out of Twitter for, you can pay for it, and I think there's even some stuff that's open. You can download it and actually crunch it and use text analytics and actually see what people are thinking and that type of stuff. And that's how they do all those trends as far as what's trending and that type of stuff. What was that? It is getting crazy. We'll talk about that in 542 too. So sometimes they know more about you than you know about yourself.
Yeah.
So like now as I get older, they sit there and they go, have you ever lived on or in like apartment 425 on 19th Street? I was like, yeah, when I was 20. But I mean, they remember the exact address. I couldn't tell you that anymore. Like, I don't even remember that. Or they sit there and go, hey, is one of your brothers named Ivan? Like, yeah, that's that. Yeah. Or have you guys gotten the eye color one yet? Yeah. So actually, sometimes they'll ask you what your eye color is because they have all that in giant database stuff because it's on your driver's license. So, that type of stuff. It's kind of scary. There's three major databases that do all that type of stuff.
And there's like a lot of tools to where like a business manager will put all your ads together and stuff like that. Like making a note of that.
So are you already publishing ads? All right. So let's boil this down. Let's simplify it. So what can we do as let's actually do Facebook for Business here. What do we want to call the people that are interacting with Facebook for Business? A business? Yeah, I like that. Plain, it's fairly straightforward and that type of stuff. Now, just realize we would have a definition again as far as what we mean for business, because business doesn't necessarily mean for-profit, right? You could be non-for-profit, you could be a social organization, that type of stuff. But they probably sit there and refer to them as collectively as businesses. And so that's what we can do here. And we'll start the opposite way around. Let's actually put the business in here. So I double click on them, type in business. Okay, now what can a business do with Facebook? They can do both of those too, right? Okay, hold on to that concept. I want to come back to that. No, that's okay. I like it though. But just give me one sec. What else can a business do? What were we just talking about? Yeah, they can place an ad. Yeah, post an ad. However you want to do it. And actually, I'll do the camel case here and that type of stuff. So they can post an ad. And are they the ones initiating it? Yep. So what we would do is we use the arrowhead on that so that we understand they're the ones that are kicking us off. Oh, another thing on the lines here, just to make your life simpler, I'm going to disconnect everything here. Whenever you click on this stuff, you get these little squares on the end. Let me zoom in. You get these little squares on the end of the line. I know this is fairly simplistic. If you don't do it, it makes your life rough. Take that, drag that over top of your guy until he turns green. See the green box around him? And let go. And that will connect him in a way that Visio will adjust it whenever you move stuff around. And you do the same thing on the other end. You can put it on like that. Well, maybe they even changed that now. You used to be able to put it on the edges too, but I never liked that because when you move stuff, it wouldn't carry with it. So essentially, that allows you to readjust everything on the fly. If you don't get it connected and you start moving stuff around, it all comes apart, and you're sitting there, crap, now I got to redo my diagram as we go through it. All right. So, what happens during posting an ad? If you guys had to be Mark Zuckerberg, how would you set this up? We're back on this website. How would you want this website to run? Facebook for Business. You go up here and you click on Create an Ad as a business. What is the experience the business is like? Yeah, all that stuff. If you couldn't hear that, is basically put in, like, probably the label of the overall advertisement, put in the text of the advertisement, put in the picture of the advertisement. Those are all steps or actions that are being taken as part of that use case, that type of stuff. Some of it may get really complicated too. It may be like, hey, define who sees my ad. Because I don't want to advertise, one of the nice things about Facebook is I don't have to advertise to everybody. I can get down, that's where this whole text analytics piece comes into play, is like, hey, you've got these interests, you've liked these things over time, I can direct my ad to those types of people. Because otherwise I'm wasting my dollars and actually advertising people that don't give two roots about the product. And that type of stuff as we go through it. That is exactly right. If you didn't hear that, it's basically, I'm repeating it for the online piece. If you didn't hear that, what it was is essentially there's, Facebook goes through and has algorithms to correlate the likes to the ads and that type of stuff too. Yeah, that's actually where they make all their money. Because the idea is that I can get right at the people that want to buy my product. And I don't have to sit there and do mass advertising. I can do direct marketing and that type of stuff as you go through it. So, and that's also, like, if you ever advertise on Google, they offer a lot of those analytics as well and that type of stuff. And, that you can even set up Google to kind of do analytics off your website. That's too, is good. So, and you can see here, here's even an advertisement that they just put out in the front up here, kind of show you what it's going to look like. So it's how do you go through and create that ad? That is your use case. That's the narrative, all the stuff that are underneath it. So right now, what we're doing, again, is a high-level overview as far as, hey, a business can post an ad and that type of stuff. So let's go back to the concept we had earlier. The other thing a business can do is they could also write on a user's wall, right, and that type of stuff too. And the way that I would see that is if I go back to mine, I'm sure I got an advertisement someplace here. Got a dead dog. Oh, there's Chase. Okay. So there's Chase Bank. Yeah, and the side, I have this over here too. So here's one as well. That's hilarious. I have no idea who that is, but evidently he's very angry at Chase. So here, this basically came up and that type of stuff. Now, do we consider that the same use case as right on a user's wall? If I'm Facebook, I probably would section that off and say that's slightly different, right? And probably a different use case. Because I'm thinking like if I'm Facebook, maybe what I'm doing is not writing on a user's wall, but I'm posting an ad on their wall. So maybe this is the generic, post an ad, and this is something along the lines of place ad. I'm looking for a different term instead of post. Place ad on user's wall. Let me make this where it's going to format correctly. And that type of stuff. Now, is the business doing that directly? Or do you think that's Facebook at work using that algorithm we talked about? Probably Facebook at work, right? So we got to remember that the system here, this rectangle, represents Facebook itself. So what probably drives this idea that I'm going to get a placement of an ad on a user's wall? So it's not the business. Like if I'm Chase, I'm not sitting there going, hey, go put this on Dale Stever's wall necessarily. I probably define the parameters to say, hey, people like Dale, put that ad on their wall. So in this case, a lot of times what you see is then the idea of time comes into play. So what there is typically is there's some type of job or that algorithm gets ran every night and says, here's probably the good, targets for Chase as far as doing their advertising and that type of stuff. And so let's play that out. So the way, and I'll just kind of walk you guys through this one, and then we'll see time again as we do more diagrams. But basically, drop in another actor. No, it's not treated any differently than the rest. But when you label it, you literally put in time. And that becomes the idea that some things occur over time. And that's what triggers it, and that type of stuff. And you can make you can make time be basically the trigger here as you go through it too. And basically, you hook it up the same way. So time basically is going through and saying, hey, place this ad on the user's wall. Who else is involved in that use case? Was I involved in it? So if this is Chase over here and they had posted an ad, then basically over time Facebook identified me as a good candidate. Huh? Yeah, either I did, probably previously. Actually I don't know why. I do have Chase, but I don't like him. Or I've never liked them on Facebook. Or I don't really care about them either, but they give me cash back. That's why. That's more than you wanted, but I'm just telling you. So here we have place ad on the user's wall. Who else is involved in that? Who am I in that scenario in just the example of Chase? Which one of these represents? Yeah, I'm a member. That's what's represented up here. So I'm engaged in that use case because I didn't actually initiate it, but I'm receiving information from that use case, right? So basically by that, that ad is being placed on my wall. So I'm actually participating in that. The other thing you can do with your diagrams to make them a little bit more readable is essentially you can repeat actors as well. I'm going to move these guys around. And that's why you always want to make sure things are connected because you will eventually move stuff around. And I think we call them Facebook members, right? Okay. And then what I can do is instead of having this line go clear across my diagram, is I can just basically connect it over this way. And we do that for readability's sake. So remember, what we're going to do is we're going to take this document, we're going to talk to people and say, hey, did we understand the requirements correctly? Is this the way we want Facebook to really work and function overall before we get too far into the technical details about how do we actually make this stuff happen in software? Yep. Yep. The other person. Yep. Yep. Because the idea there is communication is important. That's what we're doing with these diagrams. These are tools to communicate. There's really nothing else at this point. And so it makes it so much easier to read because otherwise you get lines everywhere and you can't read it as we go through it. All right. And I think that is, that's what we got for Facebook. Is there anything else you guys want to model out? No? Okay. You guys at least understand the core basics of the diagram. You understand all the different components. So we've got, let's walk through that one more time. You've got the system boundary. You've got the actual actors themselves. You got the ovals that basically represent what they can do with the system. That's the idea of using the system. You've got each of these lines, what we call association lines. The association lines come in two types. There's one with an arrowhead. In Visio right now we're using the generalization one that has the arrowhead on it. The other one is the association here because that doesn't have the arrowhead. Do a little more research, see if that's what they're expecting these days or if they just eliminated the arrowhead for some reason. And then the other things that we have is actors or nouns in singular format, and then your use cases are verb nouns. So we like a status, we post an ad, we place an ad. Verb noun, yep. Is essentially what I'm looking for as we go through this. And the other thing is your rectangle here has a name. So those are your core components around how to draw out your use case diagram. So if you guys forget when you get to your group project, maybe a little bit, or if you get into your exam, come back to the video, go to the end of this, and just review this, and that type of stuff. So here's the hard part, though. That's easy, right? That's just, can I do the mechanics of working the software? What you guys now need to reposition your mind around is that, hey, I'm actually am that business person, or I am running that institution. I'm creating the software. Whatever shoes you want to put yourselves in, you are that person. You have to define all this. And that's where it starts to get trickier and get harder. You actually have to think through all those different steps and that type of stuff. So when you get your group project, that's one of the things people struggle with is they go, oh, I know how to think like a user, but I've never had to think about how the business actually works. And that's where the research comes into play and sometimes the questioning and that type of stuff as we go through it. So this stuff should have been easy, should have been, pretty straightforward, the system you're familiar with. as you get into unknown territory and you actually have to decide how things work, that's where the actual thought comes, the critical thought comes into play. You actually have to apply this stuff then. So that, I accomplished my goal as far as what I want to do tonight. Are there any questions? No, just double check online. Nothing there. All right. Otherwise, you guys have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next week. We'll do more diagrams and exam review.